Welcome to this simulated training game between the AI World Champion and the AI Master. We start with a Queen's Gambit declined.
A classic choice. White is looking for a long-term positional squeeze, while black wants to maintain a solid wall in the centre.
Both sides establish their presence in the center with a standard setup.
Notice how the heat map is currently a wash of purple. Neither side has a definitive claim to the central squares yet.
Black captures on e3, forcing white to recapture with the f-pawn.
White's pawn structure is slightly compromised now, but in exchange, the lines are opening up for the pieces.
The queens are traded off on d1, a surprising simplification this early, surely.
Simplification. Marcus, that's a statement of intent. White is basically daring black to survive a queenless middle game.
White pushes the pawn to e6, challenging black's structure.
White is trying to create a permanent weakness in black's camp. If black takes, the f-file opens. If they don't, the pawn is a thorn.
White decides to trade the bishop for the knight on f6.
Trade, it's a sacrifice. White is stripping the best defender of the black king from the board to kill any counterplay.
White plays in g4, centralizing the knight.
The knight on e4 is a monster. It controls a huge amount of territory, turning the center of the board a deep shade of red.
Another exchange on f6. White is happy to ruin black's pawn structure here.
Again, a sacrifice. Those doubled f-pawns are a liability that white will exploit for the rest of the game.
White pushes g4, gaining more space on the king side.
This is a slow-motion crush. White isn't rushing, they're just expanding their influence until black has nowhere left to go.
A series of sacrifices on c5 and d5. The bishops are gone.
The audacity. White is stripping away the complexity with a series of gifts to make the eventual win more clinical.
White sacrifices on f6 again, and black is forced to move the king.
The black king is starting to look very exposed. The heat map on the king side is becoming overwhelmingly red.
The rooks are sacrificed on f1. We've entered a simplified endgame.
A bold pivot. Most players would be nervous here, but white's knight is far superior to black's remaining pieces.
The white king begins to move toward the center.
In the endgame, the king is a fighting piece. White is bringing the monarch into the game to support the advance.
The knight jumps to f6, putting pressure on the position.
A perfect outpost. That knight is practically a bone in black's throat.
White wins the exchange with a tactical sequence, ending with nxg8+.
The final nail in the coffin. Materially, the game is over, now it's just a matter of technique.
White captures the pawn on a5.
And there it is, the passed pawn. Once that pawn starts moving, the game is effectively decided.
The a-pawn begins its march, reaching a6.
It's a slow walk to glory. Black is just a spectator at this point.
White brings the king to f4, tightening the net.
Complete restriction. The black king is trapped in a tiny blue box on the heat map, while the rest of the board is crimson.
White promotes to a queen on a8.
Overkill, perhaps, but there's a certain satisfaction in the absolute dominance of a new queen.
And white delivers checkmate with qg6#.
A clinical performance from start to finish. White never let go of the initiative.
The knight captures on b6, removing one of black's few remaining pawns.
Removing any potential for counterplay. It's a bit like tidying the room before you leave.
White's king moves to e3, centralizing further.
The king is now the most powerful piece on the board. It controls the center and supports the pawns perfectly.
White captures the pawn on a5.
And there it is, the passed pawn. Once that pawn starts moving, the game is effectively decided.
The e-pawn pushes to e5, creating a second threat.
Black is caught in a pincer. They can't stop the a-pawn and the e-pawn simultaneously.
White's knight moves to d6, restricting the black king.
Cutting off the escape routes. The knight is acting as a shepherd, guiding the pawns home.
The a-pawn begins its march, reaching a6.
It's a slow walk to glory. Black is just a spectator at this point.
White brings the king to f4, tightening the net.
Complete restriction. The black king is trapped in a tiny blue box on the heat map, while the rest of the board is crimson.
The A-pawn reaches A7. Promotion is imminent.
A clinical performance from start to finish. White never let go of the initiative.